As I said, Cambyses II of Persia was able to win against the pharaoh's army by just simply putting cats in the front lines. What Cambyses did was that he ordered his men to paint cats' faces on their shields and actually put hundreds of cats in the front lines. He didn't order the felines to go rushing out and mauling the enemy like attack dogs do now. He just simply put them there. The reason behind this is because cats were held in a high place in Egyptian society. They were seen as sacred animals. And during the battle, Egyptian archers refused to fire a single bolt out of fear for hurting the felines, since if you hurt one, it was punishable by death. So the Egyptians went into full retreat and were slaughtered by the pursuing Persians. In this battle, the pharaoh himself was even captured. As I said, there were stories of true heroism, and one story of this was the story of the 48 Sikhs. It's similar to the story of the 300 Spartans, as in the fact that they were against completely overwhelming odds. However, if you know what Sikhs are, or who Sikhs are, they're pretty pacifist. They don't fight. As I said, this is a story of true heroism. 48 Sikhs were able to hold off 100,000 men. So what happened is that the Sikhs were fleeing from the Mughal Empire for a series of days after taking Anandpur Sahib, which was an important guru to the Sikh faith. After seeking refuge in a mud fort, an entire Mughal force had surrounded them, and instead of surrendering, like most would, the 48 Sikhs actually fought and had a legendary defense against the entire army. They defended the fort throughout the night and killed at least 3,000 Mughals. By doing this, the Sikhs bought time for their guru to escape, which in the end saved their religion. Another interesting tactic is when Julius Caesar was able to fend off a siege while laying siege to an enemy force. After a Gallic revolt at Alesia in 52 BC, Julius Caesar led 60,000 legionaries to the town and laid siege to the 80,000 strong Gallic force. However, word reached Caesar that another Gallic force, relief force that is, of 120,000 men, was marching to their position. Instead of retreating, Caesar ordered his men to build a second set of walls around the first walls, that is, the fort that they were sieging. For the next few weeks, while outnumbered 4-1, Caesar led both the siege and defended against the siege. On October 2nd, to win the battle, Caesar led a devastating cavalry charge against an attacking force of 60,000 men, forcing both the relief force and those in Alesia to surrender. In World War I, German U-boats played a major role in disrupting British, American, and French supplies. As a matter of fact, some U-boat captains were responsible for sinking 200,000 tons of shipping alone. However, the Allied powers had no submarines or countermeasures, in fact, to destroy these U-boats. But the British had a pretty crazy idea on how to deal with them. In the dead of night, convoys would send a blacksmith and a few gunners out on a small wooden raft. Once these teams spotted a U-boat periscope, they would approach it and either secure a bag over it or smash it with a hammer. This would blind the captain and force him to surface. Despite being pretty outlandish, this method was surprisingly effective, with 16 U-boats being hammered and later on destroyed. Bringing a knife to a gunfight is pretty ill-advised. Same goes for bringing wooden biplanes to a battle against Germans' elite aircraft. Well, this is what the Russians did, and it somehow worked out. The Polikarpov biplanes were entrusted to the Night Witches, a brigade of women bombers. At first, they were given this inferior tech because they were women. However, the women proved themselves worthy, with flying over 1,000 missions by the end of the war. This one secret to their success was that the biplanes were so slow for the fast German planes because the Germans had to stall to hit them, and if they had to do that, they had to fall out of the sky. Even though the biplanes could only carry 2 bombs each, their wooden frames would make them invisible to radar, making them some of the only Soviet aircraft to survive the German occupation, and most of them were flown by schoolgirls with only 4 hours of training. That's pretty crazy. Have you ever heard of the tale of the Trojan horse? Well, in this case, Viking coffins were used. Hastein, a Viking leader, was looking to sack Rome in 860 AD, an attempt to prove himself. Knowing that Vikings were far better at pillaging villages than cities, he came up with a plan to bypass the walls. Him and his men would pretend to be dead Norsemen seeking burial in the city. He and his raiding party were able to walk straight through the front gate and were able to execute Hastein's plan with success. However, he later realized that he mistook the city of Luna for Rome and pillaged the wrong city, showing that Vikings were not the smartest. Another great story of surviving against unfavorable odds was when Richard the Lionheart faced against the army of Saladin at Arsuf in 1191. Outnumbered 3-1 by a force of mostly mounted troops. Knowing that facing the Saladin's army in a pitched battle, which is a ground battle where 2 forces face off against each other, would be suicide, Richard ordered his men to form a defensive perimeter with their back to the water and wait. While doing this, they were under constant missile fire from early morning until mid-afternoon by the Saladin's army. Richard's tactic was to wait for the Saladin, get impatient, and make a stupid move. Well, after hours of constant missile attack, Richard was given his chance. Saladin, thinking that the Crusaders weren't going to move for days, he ordered his men to dismount so they could have better angle for firing. Upon seeing this, Richard moved his cavalry force to attack immediately, decimating the enemy and winning the battle. Setting your camels on fire is quite a way to escape. Well, that is what Timur did, descendant of Genghis Khan, did. When faced by the Sultan and his army of 120 war elephants in 1398, Timur ordered his terrified men to dismount their camels, load them with as much hay as possible, and set them on fire. As soon as the elephants charged, Timur's force set their mounts ablaze and prodded them towards the enemy. Instead of resulting in a horrible mistake, the tactic was actually worked. After seeing the burning camels, the elephants were spooked enough to go charging back towards the Indian front line. The Indian army was trampled by their own elephants, who were equipped with chainmail and poisoned tusks. Not only did this allow Timur an easy victory, he was also able to upgrade his camels to war elephants. Pretty good upgrade, which would be used in his favor in the invasion of India. Have you ever heard this saying, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend"? Well, that was used during May 5th, 1945. Only 3 days before the official surrender of Germany, Major Joseph Gangl and his 9 men surrendered Castle Yter and its French prisoners to 14 U.S. soldiers. When the Americans arrived to evacuate the prisoners and their former captors, they were engaged by 17th SS Grenadier Division, who had been sent to execute the prisoners. Gangl realized that the prison would be overrun before help would arrive, so he offered his assistance to the Americans. Throughout the morning, German and American soldiers fought side by side, and the only recorded case of this happening in the war. After some time, an American relief force arrived and routed the SS, but not before Gangl was killed by an enemy sniper. There's one thing history has taught us, is that if you invade Russia during the winter, you're going to have a bad time. The Teutonic Knights were yet another example of this. The Crusaders were far more equipped than the Russians, with full-plate mail armor and armored horses. The Russians would have been easily beaten in a straight fight, so they retreated over the frozen lake Peipus and then turned around to face them, hoping that the lake would slow the enemy down and then have an advantage to strike. The overeager knights followed them, not realizing that the ice would not be able to withstand their heavy armor. According to reports, the Crusaders' ranks were in chaos, slipping and breaking through the ice while fighting the armored Russian infantry. Eventual archer bombardment led to the full retreat of the Teutonic Knights. These are just some crazy tactics that leaders used to win a battle. As you can see, some of them were completely crazy, yet somehow worked, while others were just plain heroic, but they allowed them to win against difficult odds.